summarizes the case I'd like to make in the first half of the show, which is the inventions from the kingdom of ideas that is Rome are the Gregorian calendar, the Latin language, capitalism, fictional Christianity, democracy, canon law, maritime law, phony money, and the corporation. All of the above are fictional creations of the elite families of the world through which Rome has subjugated and enslaved the whole inhabited earth. Wow, that is a powerful paragraph. Can you elaborate on some of that for us?
Yeah, well, Rome has been at it for a long time, in particular the elites. These families have amassed wealth and kept it in their family lines for a long, long time. That's the secret of their control over the rest of mankind. It's the wealth, you see. They can buy all the support they need. And these families actually got the coup of the century, last century in 1913 when they got their new charter. They had two previous charters in the United States, but this was the third charter of the private central bankers. And the families were all represented there, you know, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Morgans were all the Warburgs, the Schiffs, they were all there, and they chartered the Federal Reserve. And so through that, Rome has controlled the masses because it is a Jesuit organization. It's run by the Jesuits and by the Vatican. They run everything, really. They sort of they do everything behind the scenes. It's a shadowy cabal, this Roman elite world that we live under. And one thing that must be understood is it's not just the money component that controls mankind, and it's not the political and the positive law that comes from Rome, but the third branch would be the religious side of it. The ecclesiastical system is behind all of it. They run the courts, they run even the politics, because the politics, for instance, your local councils and everything like that, they all obey the parishes. It's not the other way around, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So the land that we live on is parish and council, or you know, we could call that the political part of the aspect of the corporation. You see, I don't know what you have there in your country, but here we have councils, municipalities. You know, in America there's boroughs, counties. The Jesuits have provinces, and they trump the political system. So it's all ecclesiastical. When you go to court, you're going to a bank, and the judge is an ordinary, which is an officer of the Inquisition. He has to his right or to his left, he will have a clerk, which is nothing other than a cleric. And that's the most powerful man in the court, by the way, the cleric, the clerk. And of course the whole lot of it, I've exposed this in my presentations at length.
Mm-hmm.
How the whole thing is about paying indulgences. And the scribe and notaries are the ones who write the indulgences, because that's what scribe and notary means. It means a writer of indulgences. And so every summons and every piece of court document is actually, they are indulgences. So the Inquisition's still on, and it's all ecclesiastical. So the elites have got it down pat. They know how to control the masses. It's political, it's financial, and it's religious, and it's all run by Rome.
I mean, it's really fascinating. One thing I've heard you talk about before that I hope you can elaborate on is the truth behind the birth certificate. You know, I always thought it was a little silly that we needed it, but apparently there's an underlying meaning to why it exists.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be a protection for the individual legally, but because the bank system has usurped the natural organic government, if there ever was such a thing. I mean, it's
right.
people do still believe that the first Constitution of 1778 was really an authentic, organic document to just not to establish the rights because they are God-given, but to declare the rights of the individual. And so they think it was a fair, organic document, whereas other researchers beg to differ. They suggest that it was, just something for the elites to protect their wealth.
Mm-hmm.
But they made it appear to be a constitution and a Bill of Rights and Declaration of Independence and all of those, the Articles of Independence or and whatnot, which spawned the Republic. But see, what happened was there was the 1871 incident, and that's after 10 years of amending the Constitution and all sorts of things from 61 to 1871, that decade that Abraham Lincoln lived in. They defined the person, they redefined person, you see, and they gave corporations personhood. And then in 1871, of course, they enacted the new government in DC, you see, and that's the Vatican government. So in that decade, the Vatican came back to take its rightful place because from their perspective, they were the ones that funded, the elite families funded all the first ships that came over and established colonies and companies and what have you. And so therefore they continue to see that as their property. That's why the New World was always considered to be the property of England or the property of France or of Holland, of these conquering countries. But behind them all was the Vatican, because they had the so-called treaties, like the Treaty of Tordesillas. I hope I got that right. Yeah, Tordesillas. I usually say Tordesillas and people pull me up. But anyway, yeah, the treaty there, where the Pope of the time, I think it might have been Alexander, the one they're making the current movie about, the Borgia Pope. He was Spanish, and I think it was him, that one. And they signed this treaty, and in 1493, and gave the lands to between the Vatican families, whoever they are, and the so-called Columbus families. And that's the contract, and they always defer back to that.
Yeah.
So this ownership thing where they tell you can go and get a plot of land, which they call a lot, an allotment, go and grab that and we'll give you a title and you can own it. Well, it's an illusion, because they really don't give their property up that easy. So they know that from behind the scenes, from on top of the system, they control it all, because they have the treaties. They have the contracts, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vatican has the contract that trumps them all. All of them. And that's the Holy See, the Crown and the Commonwealth. These were well established in the days of Constantine, and even further back in the days of the Flavians, and even back further in the days of the Julians. So this is a 2,000-year-old thing. Rome is a kingdom of ideas, and it's about to fall. And all of the ideas, we're still using them. They are draconian, they are antiquated, they come from an old way of thinking. It's the old order. This is why they keep trying to sell us the New World Order, because what they're trying to do is give us another version of Rome, the Fourth Reich. You see, the First Reich was Rome. The Second Reich was the Holy Roman Empire, which lasted for 1,000 years, from Charlemagne to Napoleon's time. And then the Third Reich, well, so-called Third Reich of Hitler, to establish a third, because he went in league with the Vatican. You see, he signed a concordat with the Vatican, with Pope Pacelli, and at the time, Cardinal Pacelli, of course, and that was the Third Reich, in other words, Rome Mark III. But Rome doesn't go away that easily unless the Vatican is totally dismantled and thrown into the abyss, which it will be. We'll never get rid of this control system and the way it works and everything. It's all Roman. It's a kingdom of ideas, and it's the last great materialistic beast to fall before peace can come on this planet.
Well, I was hopeful that we were in the midst of that when the Pope retired, because that was such an unprecedented move. But, typically I'm very cynical that we'll get over these kind of things, because I just don't see the awakening happening on the level that I feel like it should. But, you've presented some information that you think that this age of awakening is something that it's beyond us. It's something that we are going to go through regardless if we want to or not. There's a mechanism there in the universe that would put us through that time. Is that kind of correct? Is that what you found?
Yes. This is a process. This is the way the universe gets things done. I mean, everything ascends like a distillery, like water.
Mm-hmm.
The sun in the solar system is able to draw the molecules of water and separate them, and is able to cause the water, which is quite heavy, but just the rays, the warm rays of the sun in the atmosphere, pull the water up and cause the clouds. And the philosophers explain that this is how the sun draws souls. The sun, the solar, is not only the chief vital force of the solar system, but it's the chief spiritual force. It's the spirit part of our nature. And it draws the souls, and all souls that have incarnated in this solar system will ascend, except for, of course, so-called evil souls that are willfully destructive and very, very intent on doing harm to others. And this is called the cycle of necessity. We are all on the cycle of necessity. We are all at a different stage of development and growth and evolution spiritually. No one person is the same or at the same level. And that's because we are on the cycle of necessity. And in the scriptures, in particular in, I think it might be Matthew chapter 16, if I'm not wrong, where it talks about there that an owner of a vineyard, he contracted some workers for 1 denarii to work for a day, which was to the value of a day's labor. But the beautiful parable, it's a beautiful parable, and it explains how we reincarnate in the cycle of necessity and how we graduate from this cycle as we do the good work. So some are ascending quicker than others, and the only reason we have holy scriptures and holy saint-like people in history is to push that process along, but it's going to happen naturally anyway. All things will be drawn to the Creator, to the light. But the parable is beautiful because it speaks how the owner of the vineyard went into town and contracted other labourers to go out and work in the vineyard. Some started at midday, some started at the 3rd hour of the afternoon, and some started at the last hour to work, and they were all contracted with the same amount of money. So when it came time at the end of the day to pay the workers, the ones that came last that only did an hour of work, they were paid the same money as the ones that were employed from the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ones that were employed in the morning complained to the master and said, "But master, we've been working all day, and then these guys only rocked up an hour ago and they get the same amount of money." And then the master says, "Well, am I doing you an injustice? Didn't we contract for one piece of money at the end of the day, and that's what I'm giving you?" And so this is a beautiful parable which explains that some reincarnate and, perhaps only take a few thousand years to find themselves, to do the good work and reascend. Whereas others linger in limbo or purgatory, or call it hell, the lower regions, for a longer time. Celsus, the 2nd century philosopher, in his book Against the Christians, the true logos, the true word, he mentions there that Empedocles spoke about 30,000 years as the average period of the cycle of necessity for each soul to be able to learn well, not necessarily learn their lessons, but remember who they are, experience all the things that the Creator wishes to experience through their soul, and then return and ascend. And so, being a sovereign, for want of a better word, I'll use sovereign because it still does contain its true essential meaning. The sovereignty movement and the lawful movement, see, people have discovered now that they have been subjected to positive law or man-made law and not natural law. And so they're opening their eyes and beginning to see this and demanding that we return to this beautiful natural way of law. Do no harm. We don't need thousands and thousands of laws or laws. Well, that's even laws, but we have enactments and statutes and bylaws and codes, and people are getting thrown into jail through these codes, you know.
Right. Endless bureaucracy.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It is, man. Let's back it up a little bit, because of all the lies and cover-ups that we've been victim to, you've said the biggest lie is the Jesus Savior story. And Kyle and I both got stuck going to Catholic school growing up. We realized that this story is bullshit. Realized it pretty early on, but your work is bringing me back around to the idea that rather than Christianity and the Jesus motif just being a mechanism for control, it might also disguise some underlying ancient truth that's been purposely weeded off the planet. Can you walk us through a bit of that lie and how the truth is coded in the Bible and in Christianity?
Yeah, for sure. Look, the Gospels are nothing other than sacred writings based on the workings of light. This is why, you know, the Gospel of John in particular, the first chapter talks about Jesus coming to the world and the light which was from above, and those from below did not recognize that light, etc., etc. And so it's dealing with light. And sometimes Jesus or the Christ takes on the character of the sun. Sometimes it takes on the archetype of the higher consciousness. But all of the characters, every single individual character in the Bible, except for post, what's that called when they put things in what's the word in retrospect?
Yeah, stuff they added way later.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, the name of Quirinius, the governor of Syria, the name Pontius Pilate, these occur in history. This was done by I think the Flavians did that. You see, these are documents that are based on light, but they are slightly mutilated. What happens is Gospels are written by philosophers, astronomers, wise men and women who understand that the only gospel there is the one in the stars. You know, the 12 signs of the zodiac are the 12 apostles, or the 12 aposts. Notice the word post in apostles. Notice the word disc in disciples. It's all dealing with the disc of the zodiac. And so, and as you begin to look upward and pay attention to the glorious works of the Creator, then you begin to realize that the only gospel there is the gospel of the zodiac. And the sun is the Christ who does his work with his 12 apostles. And so bringing about the seasons and the harvest and the wine and the bread, two symbols of Christianity. And so these gospels, what happens is, when Egypt is ruling the world 4,000 years ago, the hero of the gospel is Osiris, and his helpers have their separate respective names, and they go helping that lord. And, you know, he is the one that brings vitality and spirituality and goodness to the people of Egypt. But what happens is then Greece comes along and they also historize their documents. Plutarch in the 1st century, the priest of Delphi, he said that there was a certain guy called Ephemeris. And he said this idiot Ephemeris went around the globe collecting myths and legends and historicizing them and bringing them down to earth and making them literal human heroes. And this is where we get the expression. And Christianity is suffering with this. They have also been deceived. The Roman elite have deceived them. They have created the greatest Ponzi tax collecting scheme in history, because all of the IRS, rest assured, I can prove this. I won't be able to do it in an hour, but I can prove this. The IRS are collecting money for Jesus, rest assured. It's all about Jesus. It's all about the historical Jesus that never came and never will return. It's the literal rendering. You see, even the Bible itself tells you that the letter of the word is putting to death, but the spirit of the word is vivifying. Because people who only understand the scriptures literally suffer with a blindness. It's a spiritual blindness, because there is much, much more to these documents than meets the eye. And the story that is in there is clear. And it's only clear to people who have ascended their light and done the good work, and who can see with the mind's eye. And these people become what are termed and categorized as witches, heretics, astrologers, seers, and they are branded as lunatics, and they are ostracized because they are not belonging to the orthodox way. And a lot of them end up in psychic wards of mental institutions, because the powers that be want that. You see, they want these people out of the way, out of sight. And they've been persecuted since Hypatia, even back. You know, we've had these luminaries that have come, Socrates, Seneca, all these were put to death. Boethius, Giordano Bruno, Pico della Mirandola. All of these guys were teaching exactly the same thing as I am. I'm not original at all, you know. I'm just standing on their shoulders, and I feel like an idiot when I speak compared to them, you know. And so because I'm just a baby novice student of the great knowing ones of the past. There's two kinds of philosophers that are idolized in this world. There's thinking ones, you know, these intellectual types with their great theories. They're thinking men, you know, great men of critical thinking, rational men, philosophers. Right. They're basically just idiots, you know. Men like Darwin, full of theories, no truth, you know, no real knowledge, because it's based on his senses. All the information he gathered was based on his five senses. And Walter Russell says that this is imperial reductionism. Is that right? I'm just having a bit of a...
I don't know, man.
Well, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that they are gathering their information by what they observe with the senses. It's not knowing.
Right.
You see, so this is one kind of philosopher. They get, you know, Nobel Prizes and awards and all sorts of things. And these philosophers are glorified in the universities today, whereas the true knowing philosophers, your Pythagoras, Orpheus, Plato, these men, you know, we seem to, you know, treat them now in the universities like, oh yeah, you know, a bit strange kind of people, those people, but you know, they've got some genius about them. But it's the thinking ones these days that are praised. You know, this is why we have Hegelian dialectic and we have Malthusian schemes. You know, because they get The elites get their teachings from their favorite thinking philosophers,
Absolutely.
Hegel, Darwin and Malthus and these guys, you see, rather than getting them from, the Hermes and the Jesuses. Because when you read the Gospels, and by the way, one thing must be said. We know that the words of Jesus are not the writings of Jesus, do we not?
Right.
Well, because nowhere in the Bible does it say this is what Jesus wrote. Whereas Matthew, Mark, Luke and John all say, and Luke in particular says, I gathered this information from hearsay. Those Gospels are all hearsay.
Right.
Luke heard from someone and wrote down the Gospel, right? And so this is another way that we can really, really, really truthfully see with our mind's eyes and with our hearts that know all truth, that the Bible is a literary work, because no one's owning up to have written any stuff in there.
Right.
Well, Moses is, but Moses is a different kettle of fish. Here we have the Saviour, the one that truly, truly came to save mankind. Supposedly he turned up here for 33 years, but didn't write anything.
Right.
Said a lot of stuff.
Well,
So now it's all hearsay. So it's very convenient to do it that way. This is the way you can control it, because then you can twist the words.
Mm-hmm.
You see, because it's all hearsay.
It does seem that it's an instrumental aspect of the European expansion was always to stamp out the culture of the people they were dominating, and those cultures usually had a more natural view of the world. But I've heard you talk about Jesus as just symbolizing the sun. Is that correct? I mean, our sun, of course.
Our sun, yes, in particular. That's the Saviour, the Lord that rises. Look,
Right.
every eye shall see him. I shall return the way I departed. Yeah, because when the sun sets, you turn around 12 hours later and there it is rising.
Mm-hmm.
It's the risen Saviour. Why do we have these expressions? Why is the resurrection of Jesus celebrated in March, April, in the sign of the Lamb, Aries? Because it's the Lamb. Jesus is the Lamb. It's the sun. When the sun reaches Aries, it's the Lamb of God. When it reaches Leo, it's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. The scepter shall not depart from that sign. Leo rules the zodiac. It's the hottest month of the year. When it reaches the sign of Aquarius, it's the Son of Man.
Huh.
When it reaches the sign of Pisces, it's the Fisherman of Men. When it reaches Taurus, it's the Rock. Taurus has always been known as the Rock. When it reaches Gemini, it's the Twin. There's many paintings in Byzantine art that depicts Jesus as a twin, because it's Gemini. So the sun in Gemini is a twin. Then when Jesus, the sun, reaches Cancer, it's the scarab, and my Lord the scarab. How many church fathers say Jesus is a scarab? He's a beetle. He is my beetle. He's my holy, holy beetle, because beetle is the sign. The scarab is the crab of Cancer. Then when it reaches Virgo, it's the one that serves. Virgo is the sign of service, and so the Pisces-Virgo axis of the equinoxes that we've been under for the last 2,000 years. The sun has been in Pisces for 2,000 years, the vernal equinox, and the autumnal equinox, its opposite, has been in Virgo. This has been 2,000 years of Christian, the fisherman, Jesus, Jupiter Zeus, and Virgo, the age of service, the age of belief and doubt, because one fish believes and one fish doubts. And so when the sun arrives at the sign of Libra, it's the just one, the one who's come to judge, because Libra is the sign, the middle of the year. It's the middle of the sine wave. It's the middle. It's the 23rd of September is the other equinox. So it's virtually 180 degrees from Aries, the start. So it's the middle of the circle. And it judges. Then when the sun reaches Scorpio, it becomes the be cautious as doves and wise as serpents, because the dove and the serpent are the two animals of Scorpio. Then when the sun comes into Sagittarius, it is the one who says, I have come to divide the world. Because the arrow of Sagittarius on the 21st of December, the solstice, the shortest day of the year, where Sagittarius is pointing with his arrow, that's the dividing mark. That's the solstice.
Huh.
Sagittarius is there at the solstice, pointing to it, and waiting for the 21st of December, the solstice, for the sun. And I have come to divide the world. Then when the sun is in Capricorn, it's the carpenter, because the motto of Capricorn is I create, I use, and it's the Masonic symbol, the goat. And so you see, we have the wheel, King Arthur and his 12 knights,
right,
of the round table, Jesus and his 12 disciples. And so when you look at Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, you see Jesus is in the middle of 12 disciples, 6 to his right, 6 to his left. They are grouped further into groups of 3. So on Jesus' left, on your left as you look at the Last Supper, you see Aries to the left with his hands on the table at the head of the table. No other disciple is at the head of the table. All the other 11 are behind the table, because Aries is the head. It's in the head of the human organism. Pisces is at the feet, the 2 feet. So if you follow Leonardo from Aries from the left, you will see that he has thrown in some ciphers, very conveniently, for the ones with eyes to see, of course. And you will notice every single individual apostle from the left to the right, from Aries to Pisces, you will see secret hand positions that indicate that Leonardo da Vinci knew who the disciples were.
Wow.
Aries, Taurus, Gemini. In fact, when you get to the third, you can do this right now. You can Google the Last Supper and go to images, and you look at the third disciple from the left, and you'll see that he's sitting there with his 2 hands in front of his face, almost obscuring his face. Yes, well, because the 2 twins, Gemini. The third sign is Gemini. It rules the arms and the hands, the shoulders, and the 2 lungs.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. That's pretty interesting. He's got both his hands up, palms up.
And to Jesus' left, you will see a green Venetian ruler of Libra with her arms outstretched. Why is that very effeminate-looking apostle stretching out his arms? Is he yawning? Is he tired? Or is she? Because it's Venus. And to Jesus' right is Virgo, and Cancer is pointing to the Adam's apple, showing that there is no Adam's apple in this disciple. It must be a woman. Well, it is. It's the Virgin. And so these knowing ones, Leonardo was not a thinking philosopher. No. He was a knowing one. He knew the science, and he was conveying that through his art to the world, leaving them a message saying, one day when the enlightenment comes in 500 or 600 years, when Saturn returns in the age of Aquarius and Uranus, you will understand this picture, and you will know where I'm coming from. You will know that I knew the science of all sciences, called the perennial philosophy.
That's fascinating stuff, man.
Yeah.
That that definitely painted a little bit of a picture for me. But one other thing I really wanted to get to, it's probably a slightly lengthy topic, so we should probably try to get it in. The ascension story and the whole ascension into heaven story is an analogy for human enlightenment. How does this relate to the pineal gland?
Yeah, well, in the Bible, the pineal gland is called Penuel, and that's the place that Jacob, the place where he saw God face to face, and he called that place Penuel, which is, just a play on the word pineal. It's the pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jacob, when he ascended the ladder, he had a dream. He placed his head on a stone. That's the stone of Scone, or the sacrum, which is the second most bottom portion of the spinal column, the vertebrae, the 33 vertebrae. There are 5 bones that are fused just above the coccyx coccyx, which are composed of 4 fused bones. And this is the sacrum. This is called the sacred part of the spinal column. And this is where Jacob lays his head, and then he sees a ladder, which is the spinal column, and he sees angels descending and ascending, and he ascends the ladder. He struggles with an angel, gets a name changed to Israel, and then he says, I've seen God face to face, and he declares the name, because he has lived and not died, he declares the name Peniel. And so what this is secretly talking about in the esoteric understanding of the scriptures is that we are ascending the beautiful oil, which is called in, if you look at Sante's anatomy or Gray's anatomy, it will be called chrism. The fluid in the cerebrospinal system, which is produced in the claustrum, in the cerebellum, in the cerebrum. This oil descends down to the sacrum and then ascends through the spinal system, the cerebrospinal system, returns to the optic thalamus at the top of the medulla oblongata, and this is the chamber. This is called the chamber, you see. Mm-hmm. This is, for instance, the initiation chamber, the third ventricle in Sante's anatomy. The third ventricle is the cave of Brahma, and this is where, once the oil ascends, the pineal gland is there, see, at one end of the optic thalamus, and at the other end is the pituitary gland. So when the oil ascends and reaches these glands, electric energy arcs in the pineal gland, and this electric energy is sent through the foramen in the fornix. There's a special little place in the midbrain, and it's called the fornix. Mm-hmm. And once this electrical arcing reaches the fornix, this is illumination. The pineal gland produces a new secretion, which is called the blood of the Christ, which saves. And this balances the blood, the chemical composition of the blood, and restores the health of the individual, and activates the dormant brain cells in the cerebrum. And this is the resurrection. The dead, this is what is called the resurrection of the dead. The dead shall rise, because the dead refers to the spiritually dead. No one is saved, quote unquote, unless they have restored themselves to their higher processes, to their higher state, and remembered who they are.
And is there a way we can work on that on an individual level?
Meditation. And entheogens would be sort of more a synthetic way of doing that, but entheogens are certainly admissible.
I actually just had my first DMT experience not more than 10 days ago.
Yeah, well, it's an artificial way of inducing the whole experience of ascending the consciousness, but certainly, do not neglect your meditation. And, yes, restore yourself to your higher mind by going within. And once, the light is restored, you become clairvoyant. You don't become so much a medium of this information, you become a clairvoyant, and you know this information. You have direct access to this information. And you have downloads. You have downloads of understanding. And so, and what you do is you shed your lower perspective of seeing the world. You can't, for instance, when you get in an aeroplane, how many things have been discovered by traveling in aeroplanes? All those pyramids in Mesoamerica were discovered. The Nazca lines in Peru were discovered by raising the perspective. There are things on the ground that you just don't see. This is why the pineal gland must be reached, because along the cerebrospinal system there are 7 plexuses or nerve ganglions, and these are called chakras in the Eastern system, and these correspond to the 7 levels of consciousness. And if we are seeing things from the bottom chakra, our perspective is different from at the elevated, higher consciousness of the pineal area and the crown chakra. So this is why we need to ascend the oil, and we need to be ascended and raise our perspective. Then we see things more clearly. We see that the anthropomorphic Jesus in the Bible is not a literal character. It does not find its place anywhere in history. It's a literary character and finds its place in our hearts. This is why Jesus never did write anything. He is the inspiration of the Gospels. We are creators. We have the creating faculty, and so has the solar system. Therefore, this is what we call God. This is what we call Jesus, the Saviour, our solar system, because it is the local part of God, the Creator, the cause, which loves us and nurtures us. And so we love it, because we have only love for God's creation. And the stars above are creators, and we love them. And does not Job, the book of the Bible, talk about the morning stars, how they rejoiced and they applauded the creation, the physical creation of God?
Yeah.
Because the morning stars are the suns. It's talking about the suns. They are the creators. The light, the electrical vibration that emanates from their magnetic centers create forms. And we see those forms. And we congratulate those forms. They are beautiful. Man loves to see the curves of the beautiful opposite-sexed female. And the female loves to see the virulence and the magnificence of the masculine virility, the masculine fire body. And they meet together and they have sex and they make love and they enter the higher consciousness depending on how they practice their sex. If they are what's considered to be fornicators and adulterers, they will just indulge in lower bestial type of sex. But if they have affection and love and are more principled in their love, they will, rather than practicing, earthy type animalistic sex, they will practice divine sex. And they will raise the vibration and the oil of the chrism of Christ up the kundalini from Ophiuchus in Scorpio, one of the deacons of Scorpio in the generative system, up to the optic thalamus, which is Orion. So Ophiuchus, when we practice sex, we are stimulating the serpents of Ophiuchus, the kundalini and the kundabhafa. Mm-hmm. And we are raising the energy and the oil up the spine, because the cerebrospinal fluid is really a gas, really. It's the fish, it's the oil, it's the manna, it's the soma, it's the good oil, it's the bread. I am the bread of life. Bread. And so, as we ascend it, and we practice more divine sex in the head, we raise the vibration of our sexual practices. Then we have orgasms in the head rather than in the testes, which is actually discharging the electric and magnetic forces of the organism. I'm not condemning this, and no one condemns this, but it's just a different orgasm, mm-hmm. and so the ones that practice a more sort of a tantric sex and raise the energy, they have what's called a pneumatic or a spiritual orgasm, which is an orgasm in the mind. And these are far more sustained than the physical orgasm. The physical orgasm is fleeting, but here one is able to experience their own blissful godlike nature. This is why animals and human beings that have physical orgasms rather than spiritual orgasms desire to have the orgasm, because they want to know and experience their true nature and get in touch with it. But the philosopher, he or she declines from having this type of orgasm, and seeks the one beyond the physical, which is more emotional than spiritual than mystical. There's 4 levels. There's the physical orgasm, there's the emotional, there's the spiritual, and the mystical. And they have to do with earth, water, air, and fire. And so when you realize and understand this science, you begin to free yourself. You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Churchgoers are bound. This is what church means. A religion, relegare, is one derivative of religion. The other one, well, it would be to reveal the doctrines of truth. And so, there's always a spiritual and a physical nature to religion. And this is why people hate religion, because they see it as a physical thing, a mechanism, and they see religions, which are just corporations.
Yes.
They can't be anything but corporations, because there is, Christ is and always will be the Christ within. Colossians 1:26 and 27. Only the ignorant ones, according to the Apostle Paul, do not know this sacred secret. And hence are waiting for an external Saviour. The Christ is the process of the chrism and ascending the oil and the consciousness within. One saves oneself within. And this is why Christ is known as the Saviour.
When you talk about these energies rising, it reminds me a lot of the coiled serpent energy, and this connection with the serpent and also with sex and the feminine. I think with Christianity in particular, their origin story in Genesis, the scene with Adam and Eve and the serpent and Yahweh and the tree of life, I think it is meant in a certain way to diminish the feminine, to diminish sex, and then they instill with their morals all this shame about sex. So it seems like there's an intentional effort to move us away from this.
Only from the controlling elite. So the intent is not in the scriptures themselves. These are literary, beautiful truths, and their beauty has been
bastardized.
Exactly, beautiful word. There you go. And that has been done intentionally by the pedophile elite, who want nothing more than to control people through all these corporate religions. They are all fictional. They all only exist in the imaginations of the duped that go to these churches, and there are, I believe, now 30,000 registered so-called Christian denominations. All of them are false. They're all condemning each other, and they're all telling you, if you listen, that they're all going to hell, because that's what the Mormons are saying that the Seventh-day Adventists will do, and the Seventh-day Adventists are telling you that the Pentecostals will, and so they all will. And so what we have is, a system of great deception. And who does it serve? It serves the controlling elite. And what for? What is this the world they want? Is this the world they want, where they have to invade other countries with their partners, and they perform operations? Libya was 2 years ago when they decided to go into Libya to kill Colonel Gaddafi. That was an operation. Right. And Hillary Clinton was selling that as our partners. These are corporate crimes. You see, these days, these corporations, these partners, they get together and they go around invading other countries to steal their oil and to steal their freedoms and to install central Rothschild-run, Rockefeller-run, Vatican Jesuit-run central banks.
Right.
And whoever doesn't comply falls. And so there's murder and bloodshed in country after another. Look at Argentina in the 70s and Chile in the 70s. Look at Indonesia and look at Vietnam. Look at Korea.
Yeah.
Look at
time and time again.
Yeah, Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is just corporate bloodshed. Is this the world that they want? Do they want to be the rulers of shit? Because that's it. They're the rulers. Oh, well, they must congratulate themselves and feel very proud of themselves when they go to their Bilderberg meetings, and there's Kissinger at one table, and and there's the other imbecile, what's his name, the other idiot who founded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And they would be congratulating these types, the Kissinger types, they'd be congratulating themselves at the Bilderbergs for being the controllers of all of this, in their think tanks, in their meetings when they get together to be the controllers of all this shit. So, congratulations. They get, Barack Obama gets a Nobel Prize for being, one of the powerful boys of ruling all of this world of shit. There's
right.
security cameras everywhere. Before you board a plane these days, you've got to go through full body scanners. They want to put their fingers up your bum to see if you've got some sort of a, cracker or some dynamite up there. They want to feel what's in your pants. They want to control everything. Well, this system now we're tired of this, and even the elites are tired of this now, and there's many of them defecting and wishing for a better world. Why would you disempower the world so that they distrust you and hate banksters and hate, the controlling elite? Wouldn't you want to be loved? Wouldn't you? Why don't they just let go of this controlling system and the pedophilia and the people trafficking, the guns traffic and everything, because it's a world that's just full of turmoil and trauma, and they get to be called the bosses of it. Well, Guess what? They're going to be pushed aside, and a new consciousness is going to take over, and that will be one of self-determination, number one, of knowing thyself, knowing ourselves, number two, of tolerance, forbearance, love, generosity. To have a currency, not a fictional currency where a ruling elite derive financial benefit by just loading interest onto it. We can have a currency of love. I can say to you, brother, you know what? I'll do an hour on your show. How's that? And, I'll do that on Thursday when Thursday turns up, and I'll stick to my word.
True.
And that's pretty good currency.
Yeah.
People benefit from that. I do. I've benefited from it. And so, you rock up, you've got a sack of potatoes, and you give it to your pumpkin farmer down the road, and, there's only abundance. There's no shortages. The Bilderbergers and the trilateralists and the Council on Foreign Relations, the UN, these are all criminal corporations that are just giving you services other than the abundance that is already there. They are there to tell you that there's shortages.
Yes.
They
work
are there
hard.
to tell you. Yeah, they're working hard to tell you that, and they'll give you false science to back it up. And they'll say, there's a shortage of air, so you've got to pay carbon tax. There's a shortage of fossil fuel, so you've got to pay $3 a gallon at the tap. Everything's short, and yet I don't see shortages. I see abundance everywhere.
I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the scarcity is a bit of an illusion, and especially with things like 3D printers. I mean, 3D printers, if they can print any normal object, that right there, it's like, how do you charge for that when you're able to create infinite amounts of spatulas and plates and whatever you need?
Everything is there for our taking. It's there. This is why the original sanction and blessing to humanity is everything. There's many trees in the garden that I've planted. Eat to satisfaction. And what that means is there is abundance everywhere. Multiply yourselves is the blessing from the universe, the universe of light, and not to restrict, not to limit, not to have limitations and shortages. There's no restrictions, and so governments are there to restrict. And so we need to really deal with this fictional invention and these Ponzi schemes, the whole lot, lock, stock, and barrel. As I said before, you can go back to Constantine's family when Constantine, late in the 4th century, they discovered what was called the donation of Constantine. Look it up. The donation of Constantine is Peter's pence. This is where they get their ecclesiastical authority to go around charging taxes through the IRS and the ATO and all of these criminal organizations. It's Peter's pence. It's nothing other than Peter's pence. Rest assured and know this one universal truth. You owe no money to anybody. There is no organization that exists, because they don't exist. They're corporations, they're corpses. They have no existence outside of paper, and they cannot receive anything through not having any existence. And therefore, we are free, you see. Mm-hmm. We are free to keep all of our resources and energy and currency to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So, do not communicate with these illegal, blood-shedding entities called governments. You know, they are another creature. They are separate to us, and they are rapidly descending into the abyss with all their fictions with them. So know who you are, and know that, that we are all that is, all that was, and all that ever will be. And so it's time to kiss goodbye the Roman fictions that have been invented and are still being perpetuated by the Roman elite. Because after all, that's what they are. Look at all the presidents of the United States. They're all one big family of cousins.
Right,
like Obama's related to,
Cheney.
Bush, and they're all related. And Bush declares, they tell you that they come from the Stuarts, from the Windsors, from the Plantagenets, from the Tudors, and they tell you. And these families are the controlling elite, and they are inbred pedophile, people trafficking, pirate families who are behind all of the crime, all of the terrorism and vandalism of the earth. And we need to deal with them. So there you go, brother. That's it.
Well said, man. We've gone a little long. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I mean, I do appreciate, I feel like I can see through the corruption, the manipulation. We do that on the show a lot, but I'm a bit spiritually retarded or constipated, for a little better term. But, a lot of teachers and leaders and guests that I've had say that this is where the road leads to, there's no sense in uncovering the lies if you're not willing to deal with the truth. And, you've had some eye-opening revelations during this conversation. I really appreciate it, man. If there's anything else you want to point out to the people, let them know what your website is. Once again, is there anything else you're working on?
For the UK listeners, I'll be doing 9 engagements all through the UK, starting in the north near Scotland, going all the way down to Glastonbury. So that'll be all of August. So check out my website, universaltruthschool.com, for the UK listeners. Also, I'll be going to Italy before that. At the end of July, I'll do 4 days in Florence, 4 days of presenting sovereignty, syncretism, the science of light, astrology, astrotheology. And then in September, Holland and Italy. So if anyone wants to catch that, that's what's new in the syncretism world for me.
All right. Well, there you have it, people. Thanks again for being with us, Santos. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Keep fighting the good fight.
Okay. Bye-bye.